The phone call was not about me. At least it was not supposed to be. It was about a leaking water heater, a warranty number, and my father being annoyed that I interrupted his day. 5 minutes later, my entire life had been reduced to a line item on his retirement plan. My name is Valeria Ward. I was 29 years old the afternoon my father forgot to hang up on me. Up until that moment, if you had asked anyone who knew us, they would have called me the good daughter, the quiet one, the peacemaker, the girl who remembered every doctor's appointment, every medication refill, every brand of coffee her parents liked. That day I was standing barefoot in the small kitchen of the lake house my grandmother left me. The late autumn light coming off the Michigan water made everything look softer, like I was living inside an old photograph. The house was an old cedar place outside a town called Bayview. To most people, it was an asset. To me, it was the only place on earth that had ever felt safe. The water heater had been dripping for 3 days, a slow, maddening tick into the metal pan below it. I had tried ignoring it. I had tried tightening valves, watching do-it-yourself videos, pretending I knew what I was doing. Eventually, I gave up and pulled out my phone. My dad had reorganized the house paperwork the last time my parents stayed there, the way he always did. Like the world only made sense if he was the one stacking the folders. I stared at his name on my screen. My lungs tightened the way they always did before I heard his voice. I told myself it was a simple question. Just a warranty. No drama, no family business. I called, he answered on the fourth ring. What he barked. No, hello, no, how are you? Just that one syllable that always made me feel like I had crawled under his shoe. Hey, Dad, I said, trying to make my voice light. Sorry to bother you. The water heater is dripping again. You moved all the warranty stuff last time you were here. Do you remember where you put it? There was clinking in the background. Silverware plates. The low hum of other voices. A restaurant. Of course. He always had time to have lunch out. He only resented the money when it was my groceries or my electric bill. For heaven's sake, Valeria, he snapped louder. Now I am eating. You cannot figure anything out on your own. I swallowed. The familiar heat of shame spread down my neck. I just did not want to tear apart the whole garage if I did not have to. Can you just tell me which shelf? He sighed so loudly I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Blue crate, top shelf, back wall, left side behind the paint cans. Use your eyes, not your phone. Okay, I said quietly, thank you, enjoy lunch. He grunted something that was not really an answer. There was the muffled scrape of his phone against a table. I waited for the line to go dead, for the screen to go dark. It did not. He had not hung up. I should have ended the call and gone to the garage. I should have carried on being the daughter who never heard anything she was not meant to hear. Instead, I stood very still in my grandmother's kitchen, holding the phone near my chest. The lake light shimmered across the countertop. The drip from the water heater ticked steadily in the background, like a clock counting down to something I could not yet name. Through the small speaker, the restaurant sounds grew clearer. I heard a server ask if everything was all right. I heard my father say it was fine. Then another voice floated through my mother. Who was that? She asked. Val, my father said, exhaling my name like it weighed 100 pounds. Calling about some paperwork. Same old story. She cannot manage anything on her own, always needing help. She is helpless. My mother gave a little sigh. I could picture without seeing. A soft exhale, her fingers probably smoothing the front of whatever blouse she had worn to lunch to look like the suffering wife. It is always something with her, she said. What now? Whining about a leak, he said. There was the clink of ice in a glass. I told her where the stupid folder is. I felt the temperature in my body drop, even though the oven was warm from the lunch I had just cooked myself. I should have hung up. I did not. I listened. A chair scraped. When my father spoke again, his voice was lower, confidential, the way he sounded when he was gossiping about union politics. She is a burden, Denise. The word came through the line and settled behind my ribs like a shard of glass. I know, my mother said softly, but we have to be patient. We have to do this right. Do what he asked. You know what, she replied. We have talked about this. We cannot keep living in that cramped ranch forever. We cannot carry the taxes alone forever. This house sits here on the best water in the county. It is worth almost $1 million now, your mother's little gift. My hand tightened around the countertop edge until my knuckles hurt. My grandmother's name was not on my mother's lips when she said it. It was my father's family house, technically, but everyone had known it as Elena's place. She left it to Valeria, my father muttered. Entirely. Like we did nothing. Like we did not raise that girl. Like we did not pay for school for braces for every little thing. Now she just sits here in a house on the lake like some heiress. You are 63, my mother said calmly. I am 61. How many good years do you think we have left before knees and backs and everything else go? We deserve comfort. We deserve a proper home. And in the end, it is still family property. We just have to get her to see it. How he demanded. We get her to sign, my mother said, her voice dropping even lower. We tell her it is about inheritance, about avoiding taxes. We tell her that if she puts us on the deed, it will protect the house from lawsuits. You know how scared she is of doing anything wrong. We tell her good daughters help their parents. We remind her how much we sacrificed. She folds Ron. She always folds. I could not feel my feet. It was like my body had gone away and only my ears remained. She is stubborn, he argued. She clings to that place like Elena is still watching. She is not stubborn, my mother corrected him. She is guilty. That is her button. We press it. We remind her of all the times we went without. For her, remember when she wanted to move to Chicago for that job? You told her my blood pressure was up. She stayed. She did not even question it. She stayed because she could not stand the idea of being a bad daughter. They both laughed. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. She is a burden, my father said again, rolling the word around like it tasted good. But at least she is a burden with equity. Something clicked in my head then. A physical sensation, like gears grinding into a different position. The shaking inside me went very still. I was not a daughter in that booth. I was a number A line in their future budget. A house on the lake they believed they were owed. Targets do not scream. Targets listen. Very slowly I lowered the phone to the counter. I tapped the speaker button so I would not have to hold it. Then I opened the voice recorder app I usually used for work notes. I hit the red circle. If they wanted to turn me into an asset, they were about to learn what happens when an asset decides to fight back. Most people think rent is something you pay to a landlord once a month. In my family, rent was what you paid to simply exist. You paid it in silence, in compliance, in swallowing your anger so far down it burned your stomach lining. You paid it by being grateful, always grateful, relentlessly, grateful for things other kids took for granted. Growing up in our little tract house in Bayview, the air always felt heavier when my father pulled his work truck into the driveway. If he closed the door gently and set his lunchbox down in the kitchen, the night might be peaceful. If he slammed the door hard enough to rattle the pictures, you learned to move quietly. Dinner was where the rent was due. Every night he would sit at the head of the table like a judge, his hands still dusty from construction sites. Eyes narrowed at the plate, my mother said in front of him. If the meat was a little dry, he sighs. If it was perfect, he said nothing. I learned early that the clink of a fork could trigger a speech. You have no idea what this cost. He would start pointing his knife at me. Electric for the stove gas for the furnace, that roof over your head. You sit there with your plate full, and you do not think about the sweat it took. You should be thanking us every single day. Valeria, every single day. My mother's role was softer and somehow sharper. If my father was the thunder, she was the humidity before the storm. She did not raise her voice. She raised my guilt. Sweetheart, she would say, leaning in my doorway at night. Your father is so stressed. Do you think you could just listen to him when he vents? Let him blow off steam. Do it for me, baby girl. We are a team. A team meant I went out to the emotional battlefield and she sat on the bench. There was only one person in my life who did not charge emotional rent, my grandmother. Valeria Ward lived alone in the lake house on Willow Harbor Road. Every Saturday she would pull up in her faded teal sedan and honk twice a secret code. Just for me, I would climb in and the air in her car felt different somehow. Freer. Her house smelled like lemon oil and lavender. Jazz played low on an old stereo. There was always a bowl of fruit on the counter that I could eat without asking permission, and no one counted how many pieces I took. Elena did not teach me to bake. She taught me to read a bank statement. This, she said once, tapping a column of numbers with a manicured finger, is freedom. Money is not shopping, kiddo. Money is the power to say no. If you have your own, no one can tell you where to stand or how loud you are allowed to speak. I was 12 the day she slid a manila folder across her kitchen island and told me in her matter-of-fact way, "These are the papers for this house. Deed, tax records, all of it. One day these will matter to you." Another afternoon, while we pulled weeds near the back deck, she straightened up with a little wince and said, "Listen to me, Valeria. Never sign anything when your heart is shaking. Not a lease, not a loan, not a marriage license. If you feel guilty or scared, put the pen down. Emotions are for people. Contracts are for paper. Do not confuse the two." At the time, I rolled my eyes the way teenage girls do when their elders sound dramatic. I filed it away anyway. Somewhere deep, Elena died from a stroke on a gray Thursday in late winter when I was 24. 1 hour she was alive, humming along to some trumpet solo in her kitchen. The next she was gone. Grief felt like someone had taken the floor out from under me. The only person who had seen me as more than a utility had vanished. I cried in the hospital stairwell until my throat burned. My parents did not cry much. They were busy handling arrangements. The reading of the will happened in an old law office downtown. I remember the smell of old paper and coffee. The lawyer, a small man with careful hair, read in a flat voice. To my daughter Denise and her husband Ronald, he said, "I leave the sum of $40,000. My father's fingers tightened around my mother's hand. I saw the flash in his eyes. Calculation, then disappointment. It was enough for a truck, a couple of vacations. It was not a miracle. And to my granddaughter Valeria Ward. The lawyer continued, "I leave the remainder of my estate, including the property on Willow Harbor Road, fully paid, along with the contents of the home and an account sufficient to cover taxes and maintenance for several years." The room went so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. My father turned his head and looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. My mother's hand slipped from his. "All of it," my father asked. "The house?" "The house in its entirety," the lawyer confirmed. "She is young," my mother protested. "She does not know how to manage something like that. Surely my mother meant for us to oversee it." "The will is very clear," the lawyer replied. "There is no trustee. The deed transfers directly to Valeria." On the drive home, my father's hands strangled the steering wheel. "Well," he finally said, staring straight ahead, "at least it stays in the family. That house is not just yours, Valeria. It is a family asset, remember that." That was the first time I heard that phrase, family asset. In the years after, I convinced myself they were adjusting, that their visits to the lake house every weekend were about grief, not entitlement. That the way my father walked around the property with his chest puffed out, telling neighbors our place was harmless. Now, with my phone recording their voices at some restaurant table, I understood. They had never seen the house as my sanctuary. They had always seen it as delayed compensation, back pay on the rent they believed I owed them for being born. The invasion did not begin with a moving truck. It began with a recliner. It was a Sunday morning in late summer months before that phone call. I was sitting in the living room drinking coffee, watching light off the lake ripple across the ceiling. The house felt peaceful. Mine. The front door opened without a knock. I had given my parents a key for emergencies a year earlier. That word had stretched like old gum ever since. "Pivot, Ron, you are going to scrape the door," my mother hissed from the entryway. I set my mug down and walked into the hall. They were wrestling a bulky, coffee-colored recliner through the doorway. The fabric was worn shiny in places, darkened with oil from years of use. It smelled like my childhood living room, a mix of stale cologne and dust. "Dad, what are you doing?" I asked. Bringing my chair, he grunted, not looking at me. He was too busy trying not to dent the trim, although he had no problem smacking the thing into my walls. "That little modern sofa you have kills my back." "You did not ask," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I have chairs." He snorted. "Those are for looking at, not sitting in. A man needs a proper chair." He heaved the recliner into the middle of the living room, right in the open flow between the kitchen and the sliding doors to the deck. He dropped into it, pulled the lever with a crack, and the footrest shot out, nearly catching my shin. Now he sighed, folding his hands behind his head. "This feels like home." That sentence hung in the air. This feels like home. Home. Not mine. From that day, his chair sat there like a flag planted on conquered ground. Even when they were not visiting, the recliner squatted in the center of the room, reminding me that I was not truly alone here. Little things followed. My mother started leaving dishes in the cabinets. "It just makes sense," she said brightly. "No reason to haul things back and forth. We are here all the time." Her winter coats appeared in the guest closet. His fishing gear filled half the shed. When I protested, it was always turned back on me. "We are family," my mother would say, eyebrows pulling together as if I had hurt her. "You make it sound like we are strangers." My father took a more strategic approach. One evening on the back deck, watching the sun burn orange over the water, he said, "You know, I was talking to a guy at work. His cousin's daughter got sued because some drunk kid tripped on their dock at night, lost the whole place in court. That is the world now. You are a single woman, Val. You are a walking target." "I have insurance," I said. "Insurance weasels out of everything," he replied. "If your mother and I were on the title with you, if we set it up as an estate plan, the house would be safer. They cannot take what is spread out. We would be protecting you." My mother chimed in right on cue, "And it would make things easier later. We do not want to be a burden on you as we age. If we all consolidate now, then when we are gone, it is simple. It all goes back to you anyway." "That is not how it sounds," I said quietly. He frowned. "How does it sound?" "Like you want me to sign away part of the house," I said. His eyes flashed. "We are talking about practicalities. Your grandmother never understood that she was emotional. You are being just like her." I hated how fast the guilt came. How quickly I thought of all the times they had paid for braces, for school supplies, for shoes, and how he would remind me of each one if I pushed back. Instead of setting a boundary, I bought them a vacation. I took a bonus from work and paid for a trip to Arizona, some desert spa package my mother had clipped from a magazine and left accidentally on my counter. I told them it was a gift for their anniversary. My father had looked at the printed itinerary and said, "Well, after all we have done for you, it is the least you could do." Those words should have burned more than they did. At the time, I swallowed them like medicine. The trip bought me 2 weeks of quiet. No pop-in visits. "No, we are thinking of repainting your living room to make resale easier someday." No lectures about gratitude. The day they flew out of Detroit, my chest felt 3 pounds lighter. I remember standing in the kitchen, listening to the silence, feeling almost happy. I did not know that somewhere over the country in a crammed airplane they were already sharpening the knives they planned to use on me. When my father called from that restaurant about the water heater, the invasion had already moved from soft guilt to hard planning. I just had not seen the map yet. After I hit record and set the phone on the counter, I kept listening. "We will do it the night we get back," my father said between bites of something. "Do not give her time to think. We show up. Sit her down, lay it out. Serious talk?" "She hates serious talks," my mother said. "She shakes." "Exactly," he said. "Fear makes people sign. We tell her we are drowning. We say my pension is not enough. We talk about my back. The stress. Doctor says I am at risk of a stroke. She will not want that on her conscience. We put the papers in front of her, and she will hold the pen just to make us stop talking. And if she hesitates," my mother added, "we remind her about college, about the car we bought her when she graduated, about every holiday we paid for, every gift. Interest accrues. Guilt accrues. It is time to cash out." I watched the little digital waveform dance across my phone screen. Every spike was an accusation. Every valley was the space where I used to put their feelings before my own. Then he said a name that made my stomach knot. "I talked to Curtis," my father said. Curtis was an old friend of his, the kind of man who always smelled faintly of whiskey and ink. Curtis worked at the county clerk's office downtown. He was the one who had taken care of a speeding ticket for me in high school. A favor my father remembered every time he wanted me to do something I did not want to do. "What did he say?" my mother asked. "He said if we bring the deed forms in late on a Friday, he can push them through fast," my father replied. "He is not going to squint too hard at the notary stamp. As long as the signature looks close, it gets recorded. By Monday, the system shows our names on that property. After that, she can scream all she wants. 50-50 ownership at least. Maybe we go all the way." There was a heartbeat of silence. "Ron," my mother whispered, "forging is a big step." He laughed. "You have seen her signature. She signs things without reading all the time. You really think a judge will believe she did not sign? She is anxious. She forgets. That is how they are going to see her. They always think the quiet one is confused. Something inside me flipped. I thought of a text from my mother a week earlier. "Hey, honey," it had said. "Travel agent needs info for next family trip. Can you send a picture of your driver's license and passport page?" I had sent them in the middle of a meeting. I had wanted to be helpful. I had wanted stupidly to believe there would be a family trip. My vision went hot around the edges. They had my identification. They had the old paperwork from Elena's files. They had a friend at the clerk's office. All they needed was some ink and a shaky pen line that sort of looked like mine. I stopped the recording with a trembling finger. Then I saved it. I named the file. Something simple. Truth. My heart was pounding, but a strange calm threaded through it. The kind that comes when the worst fear you never dared name stands up and introduces itself. "They are going to steal your house," a clear voice in my head said. Not figuratively, literally. I did not cry. There were no tears left for them. Instead, I grabbed a legal pad from the drawer and a pen. At the top of the page, I wrote, "Exit plan." Under it, I made 3 columns. Their story. My reality proof. Their story. We are broke. My reality. He just bought a new truck in cash this year. Proof. The picture he posted on social media, the tax records. Their story. We just want to protect your inheritance. My reality. They are planning to borrow against the equity proof call credit bureaus. Their story. We deserve the house because we raised you. My reality. The house was Elena's decision alone. Proof: the will. The recording. The fact that she skipped them on purpose. As the list grew, my breathing evened out. I was not just a scared daughter anymore. I was a woman building a case. Later that evening, I opened my laptop at the same kitchen island where Elena once explained compound interest to me. The faint smell of lavender oil still lingered in the wood. I searched for property and inheritance lawyers near Bayview. Most of the websites were smiling couples, and "we care about your family" branding. I did not want a family therapist in a blazer. I wanted a shark. I found her 3 pages in. Her site was simple, no staged photos, just a line across the top. Protect what is yours when family will not. Her name was Marisol Vega. She handled property disputes, financial abuse, and fraud. I read 3 case summaries, each one a story of someone who thought they were powerless, until Marisol helped them remember they were not. I wrote an email. "My parents are planning to force or forge a transfer of my lake house," I typed. "My grandmother left it solely to me in her will." I have an audio recording of them discussing using a friend at the clerk's office. I need to protect myself before they act. I am done being the quiet daughter. I am ready to fight. I hit send. Outside, the lake was calm, dark, hiding its depth. Inside, something in me finally stopped begging for their approval and started sharpening itself. They had drawn the blueprint for how to strip me of everything Elena gave me. I was about to draft another one. This blueprint was about revenge, but not the petty kind. Not smashed tires or shouted words. I wanted a revenge built out of lawyers, contracts, and signatures they could not undo. They thought I would sign anything if they shook me hard enough. They had forgotten who taught me how to hold a pen. Marisol replied within hours. Her assistant called first thing the next morning and offered me an appointment that afternoon. "Bring any documents you have," she said. And the recording. Ms. Vega likes to walk into a fight with both hands full. The way she said fight made my shoulders drop half an inch. Somebody finally saw this for what it was. Not a misunderstanding. A battle. Before the appointment, I had work to do. I called the customer service line on the back of my bank card. When the automated voice asked why I was calling, I said the word I had been too ashamed to think fraud. A real person came on the line. Her name was Tessa. Her voice was calm, steady the way nurses sound in emergency rooms. I did not give her the whole saga. I did not talk about chair invasions or childhood rent. I gave her the facts. My parents have access to too much of my personal information. I said I believe they are planning something with my property. I need a verbal password on every account. I need no large transfers allowed without it. and I need all new cards and statements to go to a private address. She asked what password I wanted. I looked around the kitchen. On the windowsill, a small bundle of dried lavender. Elena had hung years ago still clung to the light. Lavender, I said. Done, Tessa replied. Anything else? Yes, I said I need to freeze my credit with every bureau. No one opens anything in my name. Not a store card, not a loan, not a line of credit. It took time. Time on hold. Time repeating my social security number. Time answering questions about previous addresses and car loans. Every correct answer felt like another bit of control reclaimed. When I finally logged into my credit report, I saw it. One hard inquiry from a national bank a few days earlier. Purpose Home Equity Line of Credit application pending. They had not wasted time. While I had been folding towels and cooking dinner, they had been trying to pull cash out of my house as if it were their automatic teller. Maybe Curtis had coached them on what they needed to submit. I took a screenshot evidence. Next, I opened a new account at a small credit union in a town a few hours away. I transferred almost everything there I left, only enough in my old account to look normal. My parents knew that account. If they tried anything, they would find an almost empty shell. Then I did something that shook me more than I expected. I took the spare key they had to the lake house off the hook by the door and slid it into my pocket. The idea of changing the locks made me feel disloyal, even as their voices echoed in my head, calling me an investment. That is what abuse does. It programs you to protect your abuser's feelings instead of your own safety. I called a locksmith anyway. By the time I left for Marisol's office, there were new deadbolts on every exterior door. The locksmith had handed me 3 shiny keys. You want me to rekey the old lock too? He had asked. No, I said, just these, the past can keep that one. Marisol's office was in a converted brick building downtown. Nothing glossy. Dark wood floors. Bare walls. A long hallway that made you feel like you were walking deeper into something serious. She was in her early 40s maybe, with dark hair pulled back and a pair of glasses that made her look like she could cut through steel just by reading about it. She listened without interrupting as I played the recording. Her face did not twist in sympathy, it hardened in focus. When it ended, she folded her hands. Let us be clear, she said. Right now on paper, who owns the house? I do, I said, just me. The deed is only in my name. Elena knew what she was doing. Marisol nodded. Good, that is our ground. In the eyes of the law, your parents have as much claim to that house as I do. The only way they get a foothold is if you sign something, or if they manage to forge and file something before we act. So we are going to move faster than they expect. She took out a legal pad. Step 1, she said. We secure your finances, which you have already started. Step 2. We prepare in case they file anything shady. I will send a letter to the clerk's office putting them on notice that any deed change or document with your name is to be flagged and cross-checked with my office. I will not accuse anyone yet, but I will make sure Curtis thinks twice before sliding anything through. Can you do that? I asked. I cannot stop him from breaking the law, she said. But I can make sure if he does, there is a record that we warn them. Judges like paper trails. She flipped to a new page. Step 3, she continued. We consider removing the asset from the board entirely. What does that mean? It means, she said, leaning back, you sell the house before they land. The idea punched the air out of me. The house was Elena. The deck where we drank lemonade. The kitchen where she taught me that money could be a shield. The bedroom where I cried after her funeral. I cannot just walk away, I whispered. You would not be walking away, Marisol said. You would be walking out with your equity in your own account instead of trapped in wood and shingles. They can try to take, you can buy another place later, a place they have never set foot in. Right now, you are trying to defend a fortress from people who already know the gate code. Sometimes the only winning move is to burn the bridge behind you. Silence stretched. I am not asking you to decide this. Second, she said more gently. I am telling you that, from a legal and strategic standpoint, selling quietly to a private buyer before they get back is the cleanest revenge you can have. No screaming match, no tearful fight over paper. Just facts. They come home to find the castle gone. They tried to play games with inheritance. You moved the board. How fast can a sale happen? I asked, my voice sounding far away to my own ears. If we do it on the open market too slow, she said. If we do it through a private agent who specializes in off-market deals, and if the buyer is an investment group with cash very fast, I know a man who handles properties on the lake. He can find someone who wants a quiet vacation rental. You will have to accept that they may never love the house like you did, but they will pay you enough to start over. My heart squeezed. I do not want them to have it, I said. Not even a piece. I do not want them walking through these rooms like they are owed the view. Then let us make sure the only thing they ever see again is a closed door, Marisol said. She slid a business card across the desk. Call this agent, she said. His name is Elliot Rhodes. Tell him I sent you. If you decide to go through with this, you will need to move quickly and quietly, and Valeria. Yes. If they show up before the plan is done, do not argue, she said. Say as little as possible. No. Long explanations. You are not on trial. Let your decisions speak. On my way out, I stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the gray Michigan sky. For the first time, I wondered what it would feel like to live somewhere my parents had never criticized the paint color. Driving back to the lake, the road blurred a little. I kept seeing Elena's hands on that folder years ago. Never sign when your heart is shaking, she had said. My heart was not shaking anymore. It was beating steady and slow like footsteps walking away. I pulled into the driveway, sat there for a long moment, then went inside and opened my laptop. I dialed the number on Elliot's card. When he answered, I said, I have a house on the lake that needs to disappear. Elliot met me the next morning at a coffee shop in town. Not at the house, I appreciated that. It made the whole thing feel less like betrayal and more like strategy. He was in his 50s, silver at his temples. Calm eyes that had seen a lot of people let go of a lot of property. He listened as I explained in broad strokes that I needed a fast, quiet sale to a buyer who would not back out if my parents made noise later. I get calls like this more than you would think. He said family drama, revenge, inheritance all wrapped around a lake view. People are messy. Assets are simple. I can have a cash buyer for you within a few days. The market on this shoreline is fierce. He pulled out a pad and sketched a rough timeline. Offer accepted by the end of tomorrow. Title search done by the day after closing documents. Prepared the next deed recorded and keys turned over, right about when you say your parents' plane lands. It will be tight, but if you are decisive, it is doable. Decisive. That word felt strange in my mouth. I had spent most of my life being anything but. What about my things, I asked. Movers, he said. 2 sets, one for you. One for anything that might be theirs. Put their stuff in storage, that way if they try to accuse you of theft, you hand them a key and a receipt. Judges love receipts. Driving back the lake glittered on my right like a secret. I thought of all the nights I had stood on the dock and tried to feel grateful instead of small. All the times my father had bragged to his friends about our place, slapping the deck rail like he had built it board by board. That night, I went to the hardware store and bought 3 rolls of painter's tape in different colors. Blue, red, and green. I started in the living room. Everything I had bought with my own money after Grandma's will got blue tape. The slim gray sofa. The mid-century coffee table I had found at a flea market. The cheap bookshelf filled with architecture guides and novels and cookbooks. Anything that belonged to my parents got red tape. The enormous recliner. My mother's decorative vases she kept rearranging. His fishing rod stacked in the corner. The old blender he had insisted on bringing over because there is nothing wrong with it when I bought myself a new one. The things that were complicated, the ones with history tangled through them, got green. A quilt Elena had sewn, which my mother always claimed was meant for me someday. A set of china that had been my great-grandmother's photo albums that were mostly pictures of me, but lived in a box my mother had stored in the closet. The house slowly bloomed with color. Blue for mine. Red for theirs, green for a past. I was still deciding how to carry. I took photos of every room. Wide shots and close-ups, every red-tagged item got at least 2 angles. The recliner, the boxes of my father's bowling trophies, my mother's holiday decorations. It felt clinical, almost cold, but tucked underneath it all was a hot, bright vein of anger. They had called me a burden. They had planned to backdate my signature. This was not cruelty. This was self-defense. The next day I drove to a storage facility near the edge of town, the kind that advertised climate control and security cameras. The manager, A woman with kind eyes and no interest in my story set me up with a large unit. What name should I put it under, she asked. Ronald and Denise Ward. I said my parents' names. So you are paying for a unit in their name, she asked, surprised. For 6 months, I said. After that, it is their problem. I paid in cash. She handed me 2 keys and a contract. I read every line before I signed my heart, steady as a metronome. Back at the house, I called 2 moving companies. I need 1 truck to take all the blue tape items to a new address, I said, and another to take all the red tape items to a storage unit. Yes, there is a list. No, the owners will not be present. Yes, I understand how strange that sounds. My new address was a small apartment in a secure building in Grand Rapids. I had signed the lease online that morning. No yard, no lake view, no family history. The listing had called it a blank slate. That was exactly what I wanted. At night, when the house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the far-off slap of waves, I walked from room to room. I could almost hear Elena's voice. A house is just boards and pipes, she had told me once. A home is where you can exhale. This place had stopped being a home the first time I stood in my own kitchen and heard my parents call me a burden. It had become a battlefield, moving, selling, walking away. It all felt like lighting a match and walking out while the flames did what they needed to do. Revenge. I was starting to understand is not always about watching your enemies suffer. Sometimes it is about making sure they can no longer reach you. The offer came in the next day. Elliot called while I was labeling my grandmother's old cedar chest with blue tape. I have a corporate client, he said. They manage properties for executives. They want a discreet retreat on the lake. They are willing to pay close to your asking price in cash if they can close quickly and do a simple inspection waiver. They do not care about your family drama. They care about square footage and shoreline. My throat tightened. So that is it. Not quite, he said. We still have to sign the purchase agreement, run a title search schedule closing. But once you sign, backing out would cost them money. People who speak the language of assets hate losing money. That is our leverage. At the closing attorney's office 2 days later, I sat across a polished table from a man in a suit who represented the buying company Lakefront Holdings. A bland name for a bland entity. Perfect. The purchase documents were a stack as thick as my hand. The attorney went through them page by page, purchase price, condition clauses, as-is agreements. There it was in black and white, the value of my quiet revenge. Just under $950,000. Any questions, he asked? I thought of Elena and her warning. I waited, checked in with my body. My heart was not shaking. My hands were steady. I am ready, I said. I signed. My name over and over. Each stroke of the pen felt like cutting a rope that had been binding me to a dock that no longer existed. When it was done, the attorney smiled. Congratulations. Once the wire clears and the deed records at the county, you are officially free of this property. Free. On the drive back, I pulled over once halfway between downtown and the lake just to breathe. There was grief. Of course there was. Elena would never walk those floors again. I would never drink coffee on that deck the way we had. But threaded through the loss was a strange, fierce joy. My parents had thought they were the only ones allowed to move pieces on the board. I had just flipped the whole table. Moving day was a blur of cardboard and shouted directions. The blue tape crew in their matching shirts carried my life piece by piece into the first truck, my bed, my books, my thrift store dishes, the few pieces of jewelry Elena had left me. The red tape crew followed a different list. The recliner, I said, pointing careful. It belongs to my father. It is going to storage, not to my new place. One of the movers raised an eyebrow. You sure this thing has seen better days? I am absolutely sure, I said. Box after box went into the second truck. My mother's quilts, my parents' winter coats, his tools, her Christmas knickknacks. The sight of their things leaving the house without them, there felt surreal, like I had stepped into someone else's revenge fantasy from an online forum. Pro-revenge, but with contracts. By late afternoon, the house was almost empty. Bare floors, pale rectangles on the walls where pictures had hung. The echo of my footsteps followed me through the rooms. In the kitchen, I wiped down the counters. It felt important to leave it clean. Not for my parents, for the strangers who would live here next. They had nothing to do with my family drama or the years of manipulation soaked into these walls. They were just paying for square footage and a view. On the front door, I taped a large envelope with duct tape. It was impossible to miss. On the front, in thick black marker, I had written my parents' names. Inside was the key to the storage unit, a printed map, the contract showing 6 months prepaid, and a 3-sentence note. The house has been sold. Your belongings are in Unit 4B at Bayview Secure Storage, paid through spring. Do not contact me. I had rewritten the note a dozen times in my head. Longer versions full of explanations and hurt and all the ways they had failed me. All the ways they had twisted the idea of parents until it was unrecognizable. In the end, I kept it short. They had never listened when I tried to explain myself before. There was no reason to believe they would start now. On the way out, I stopped by my neighbor's yard. Mrs. Klein lived in the small bungalow next door. 70. Something always in the garden, always with a watchful eye. She had seen my father snap at me enough times to know the shape of our family drama without me drawing it in detail. I am leaving, I told her over the fence. She looked me up and down, taking in the moving trucks, the tired set of my shoulders. About time, she said. That house has been too small for all the egos stuffed into it. I sold it. I said, a company bought it. New owners take possession tomorrow. My parents, they do not know yet. Her eyes gleamed. Oh, they are going to make a scene. That is what I am worried about, I admitted. They come back from their trip tomorrow evening. I will be long gone. But if they bang on doors, if they yell about theft, if you see something, would you mind telling any officer who shows up the truth that I lived here alone, that they were just guests, that they do not own this place? She straightened her back. I have my hearing aids charged and my porch light ready, she said. If they cause trouble, I will be right here telling anyone who asks exactly how many times I have heard your father complain that the house should have been his. People, like that, do not deserve the benefit of the doubt. Thank you, I said, my throat thick. I knew your grandmother, she said more softly. She would be proud. Not because you sold the house, because you stopped letting them rent space in your life for free. I carried the last box to my car. On the passenger seat was a small wooden box filled with Elena's letters and a tiny envelope of lavender seeds. My new apartment did not have a yard, but it did have a balcony, with a pot big enough for a little patch of purple. I did not look back when I pulled out of the driveway. The house behind me was just boards and pipes now. The home I was heading toward was the space I was carving out inside myself, where their voices could no longer reach. I was not there. When my parents' taxi pulled up in front of the lake house, I did not have to be Mrs. Klein's retelling, combined with my own imagination and 3 decades of knowing their patterns, painted the picture in high definition. It was early evening, the kind of crisp Michigan dusk where the air smells like wood smoke and wet leaves. The streetlights had just flicked on. The taxi dropped them at the end of the walkway. My father got out first, rolling his neck, already complaining about his back. My mother followed, dragging a suitcase, waiting for him to notice. He did not. He never did. He walked up the path like a man approaching his kingdom. In his mind, this was the mansion he had been promised by some cosmic inheritance judge. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his key, and jammed it into the lock without even reading the envelope taped across the door. The key did not turn. He jiggled it, swore, tried again harder. The deadbolt sat there unmoved, unimpressed. Valeria, he shouted, pounding on the wood. Open the door. Your damn lock is broken. Mrs. Klein, sitting behind her curtains with her lights off, told me later that he must have yelled my name 5 times, each one louder than the last. My mother eventually noticed the envelope. She tugged at the tape until it came free and opened it. I can see her face in my mind, the flicker of confusion as she read. Then the rush of red rising up her neck. The house has been sold, she read aloud, her voice cracking on the word. Sold. My father snatched the paper, skimmed, then crumpled it in his fist. No, he said. Just that one syllable filled with the same certainty he used when he told me as a child that my feelings were wrong. She cannot do this. This is ours. We raised her. We put in the equity. This is our inheritance. He pounded the door again, as if the lock cared about his investment speech. "Open this door, Valeria," he bellowed. "You have no right. This is family property. You are being dramatic. This is not funny." Mrs. Klein told me she could hear his breathing from her porch. Loud, ragged, the sound of a man whose version of reality had just been snatched away, and underneath it the sound of something else. Panic. At some point he noticed the small real estate sign near the road. By appointment only, it said with Elliot's company name beneath it. A smaller sign for Lakefront Holdings hung below. He ripped it out of the ground and threw it onto the lawn. My mother, who always cared more about appearances, pulled out her phone. "I am calling the police," she announced. "For what?" he snapped. For theft," she said, struggling to find solid ground. "She has stolen from us. She sold our family home. Mrs. Klein told me she walked over, then finally turning on her porch light and stepping out. "Evening." She said, her voice sweet as tea and twice as dangerous. "Everything all right?" "No," my mother said, tears standing in her eyes. "Our daughter has gone crazy. She locked us out of our own house. She sold it." Mrs. Klein raised her eyebrows. "Your house?" "My mother's house," my father corrected, puffing up, "which should have come to us. We have been living here, paying for things, taking care of it. She had no right to sell it out from under us." Mrs. Klein looked at the envelope still clutched in his hand. "Interesting. Because from where I sit for the last few years, I have watched your daughter live here alone. I have watched you visit. I have watched you bring your old furniture and tell anyone who would listen that you deserve the place. But I have also watched her pay every contractor, every delivery man, every snowplow driver, in my book that makes it her house to sell." "You do not know what you are talking about," my father snarled. "I know that when Elena passed, she told me she left this place to Valeria," Mrs. Klein said calmly. Her words were, "So the girl will have somewhere safe when the rest of the family starts circling." I guess she was right. My mother's mouth opened and closed. The police did come. Mrs. Klein called them herself before my parents could spin some wild story about a mentally unstable daughter. She wanted to be the one to frame the narrative. When the officers arrived, young men in dark uniforms, my father launched into a tale about ungrateful children, betrayal, injustice. He said the word inheritance so many times it started to lose meaning. The officers listened. They asked for identification. They checked the county records on their in-car computer. The deed, as of that morning, listed Lakefront Holdings as the owner. Before that, it had listed only me. No trace of Ronald or Denise anywhere. "Sir," one of the officers finally said, "I understand you are upset. But from what we see here, this property was never in your name. Your daughter, as the previous owner, had every right to sell it." "She tricked us," my mother cried. "She owes us. We sacrificed everything If you believe there has been some kind of fraud," the officer said, slipping into formal language, "you are free to consult a lawyer. But as far as we are concerned right now, you are two people trying to enter a home that does not belong to you. I suggest you clear the walkway. The new owners will be here soon." According to Mrs. Klein, that is when the fight between my parents really started. My father turned on my mother. "You and your guilt trips," he snapped. "You said she would fold. You said all we had to do was push her. You said Curtis would—" He stopped too late. "Curtis would," what the officer asked sharply. My mother shot my father a look that could have lit the wet leaves on fire. "Nothing," she said quickly. "Just a family friend. This is all a misunderstanding. We will figure it out." The officers left. My parents were left standing on the sidewalk with 2 suitcases and nowhere to go, but back to their own small house in town. The one they had always complained was too cramped. As for their things, they found out about those the next day when my mother finally read the whole note and realized where the recliner and all the boxes had gone. I heard later through legal correspondence that my father went to the storage facility, in a rage waving the contract and shouting about theft. The manager, bless her, pointed to the names on the rental agreement. His name, my mother's name, paid through. "She did not steal your stuff, sir," she told him. "She preserved it. You can move it out whenever you like." The tables had turned so completely it almost made me dizzy to think about. For years, they had used the word burden like a weapon. Now they were the ones feeling the weight of not having access to the asset they had counted on. Karma is not always poetic. It does not always come as a car crash or a public humiliation. Sometimes karma looks like a very calm woman behind a storage counter saying, "Actually, sir, she did everything by the book." Their first attempt to reach me came in the form of a letter from a lawyer who clearly did not know what he was signing up for. He sent a thick packet to my old post office box in Bayview, which I had set to forward to Marisol's office. They accused me of undue influence, of taking advantage of elderly parents, of disposing of joint property. They claimed that the lake house was a constructive trust, that everything Elena had meant for the family had somehow magically translated into them. Marisol slid the packet across her desk and watched my face as I read. "Do they really believe this?" I asked. "They believe whatever story lets them feel like the victims," she said. "But more importantly, they believe you are still the girl who will do anything to avoid being called selfish. They are counting on you to cave at the first threat." I looked up. "I'm not going to." "Good," she said, "because we are going to respond, and we are going to attach a little audio file as Exhibit A." She had already transcribed the recording. Seeing their words in print, the ones about using Curtis to push a forged deed through, about cashing out my equity, about my supposed weakness, made my skin crawl. "This," she said, tapping the page, "is what we call evidence of intent. Judges love intent. It shows who was planning what and when. Combined with the credit inquiries in your name and the texts asking for your identification, we can paint a very clear picture. They were plotting to commit fraud. You took legal steps to protect yourself. If they keep pushing, we push back harder. I am not just talking about a countersuit for harassment. I am talking about a complaint to the state bar about Curtis. No clerk wants an ethics investigation on their record." Part of me still flinched. They were my parents. Even if they were terrible ones, the idea of them facing criminal scrutiny twisted something in my chest. Marisol watched me carefully. "Say what you are thinking," she said. "I do not want them in jail," I said softly. "I just want them out of my life." "Then our goal is pressure, not prison," she said. "We will not file a criminal complaint first. We will respond firmly to this nonsense. Make it clear that if they keep swinging, we have sharper blades." Most bullies fold when they realize their target has teeth. Her letter was a work of art, cold, factual, completely devoid of drama. She laid out the timeline. Elena's will, the deed solely in my name, the absence of any financial contribution from my parents to the property, beyond minor incidental items. Then she detailed the recording, the attempted credit line, the spare key, the identity documents. At no point, one line read, "Did my client invite your clients to invest in or co-own the property?" Any belief they had in a future ownership interest existed only in their own expectations, not in law. Your clients may feel entitled. They are not entitled. The last paragraph was the sharpest. "Should your clients choose to pursue this baseless action, be advised that we are prepared to submit the audio recording and documentary evidence to the appropriate authorities, including the County Ethics Board and the State Attorney General's office. We strongly recommend that they consider whether continued litigation is in their best interest." We sent it. Then we waited. In my new apartment, I started to build a life. It felt small compared to the lake house. No dock, no fireplace, just a clean kitchen, a tiny balcony, a bedroom that held only what I chose to put in it. On the balcony, in a wide ceramic pot, I poured soil and pressed lavender seeds into it. It felt silly at first, childish, but when the first little green shoots pushed through a few weeks later, I cried anyway, quietly. I went to therapy. Not the hurried, half-honest sessions I had tried in college when I still hoped if I just fixed myself, my parents would be easier to love. This time, I told the truth. My father thought love was a debt I owed him. I told the therapist, a woman with kind eyes and firm boundaries. My mother thought manipulation was connection. I spent my whole life paying for a bill I never agreed to. Selling the house felt like stealing something from them. I keep waiting to feel like a monster. "And do you?" she asked. I thought about it. Sometimes, I admitted. Then I listened to the recording again, and I remember what they were willing to do to me. And I feel not proud exactly, just less ashamed. "That feeling," she said, "is you rediscovering your own dignity. Revenge gets a bad reputation. But sometimes what people call revenge is just self-respect with teeth." When the response finally came, it was shorter. Their lawyer, apparently now more informed about the evidence, suggested mutual disengagement. They would withdraw their complaint. I would agree not to pursue formal charges or complaints against them or Curtis. Everyone would pay their own legal fees. Everyone would go their separate ways. You are not obligated to agree, Marisol said. We could push. I sat with it. I pictured my father pacing in their little living room, furious that his big play had backfired. My mother on the phone with relatives spinning stories about my mental break. I pictured Curtis sweating at his desk, wondering how close he had come to losing his job over a favor. What happens if we sign? I asked. Then she said nothing. That is the point. No more letters, no more threats. You keep your money, they keep their recliner in storage or bring it home. You walk away. I thought about what revenge meant to me. It did not mean them in orange jumpsuits. It did not mean them homeless. It meant living a life where their voices were no longer the loudest thing in my head. Draft the agreement, I said. Include a no-contact clause. Email only through your office. If there is ever legitimate business, but no more calls, no more texts, no more showing up. Marisol smiled for the first time since I had met her. It was a small smile, but it reached her eyes. Now that she said is justice, cutting off your parents is not a moment. It is a series of moments. Little ones like not answering when an unknown number calls, bigger ones like deleting an old voicemail. You have been saving, not because it was kind, but because it proved they had. At some point sounded like they cared. There were things I did not get out of this revenge. I did not get an apology. No, we are sorry. We treated you like an insurance policy. No, we are ashamed we plotted to steal your inheritance. No acknowledgement that calling your own daughter a burden while planning to take her house might perhaps be the definition of betrayal. They sent one more message through Marisol's office after the no-contact agreement was signed. It was not an apology, it was a statement. We are hurt, my mother had written. We feel excluded. We never meant for things to go this far. We just did not want to be forgotten in our old age. I read it once. I did not respond. You cannot reason someone out of a narrative where they are always the ones who have been wronged. I did not get understanding from extended family, either. People who had only ever seen my parents at holidays, laughing and handing out gifts, found it easier to believe I had become cold and selfish than to accept that the smiling couple at the barbecue could be capable of manipulation and attempted fraud. Parents make mistakes, one aunt said in a message. You only get one set. You will regret this someday. I had already regretted most of my life up to that point. Regretted every year I stayed in town, instead of taking promotions in other cities because they hinted they needed me close. Regretted every check I wrote for their emergencies while they bought boats and vacations. For once I wanted to make a choice I would not regret. What I did get was something harder to describe. Space. Silence that did not feel threatening. Weekends where my time was my own. A kitchen where no one criticized the placement of my utensils. I used some of the money from the house to pay off my student loans. The rest went into investments and savings, just like Elena had taught me. Not into flashy cars or trying to prove on social media that I was doing fine. My revenge was not about showing them what they were missing. It was about never needing anything from them again. Sometimes late at night, I would sit on my small balcony in Grand Rapids, cup of tea in hand, and think about alternative timelines. The ones where I had signed whatever paper they shoved in front of me. The ones where I had stayed quiet, telling myself that giving them what they wanted was the price of being a good daughter. In those alternate worlds, I saw myself living in the lake house with them settled in like royalty. My father's recliner permanently in the best spot. My mother reorganizing my cabinets. Both of them making decisions about renovations and loans without my consent. I saw myself paying for their comfort with my sanity. There is a saying that revenge is a dish best served cold. Personally, I think revenge is best served in the form of a life where the person who hurt you no longer gets to define who you are. I was not just the quiet girl anymore. Not just the peacemaker in a family drama I never auditioned for. I was the woman who had listened. Recorded, planned, hired a lawyer, sold a house, moved and rebuilt. I was someone my grandmother would have recognized. Never sign when your heart is shaking, she had said. I finally understood the other half of that sentence. When your heart is steady, sign whatever you need to sign to free yourself. The first time I told this story out loud, start to finish, it was not to a lawyer or a therapist. It was to a camera. A friend of mine, Leah, had started a small channel where people shared real-life stories of family drama, betrayal, and revenge. Most of her viewers, she told me, were older women, mothers and grandmothers who had lived through their own quiet wars. They love when the quiet one wins, Leah said. You have that kind of story, only if you want to share, obviously. I hesitated. For so long, my parents had controlled the narrative. To the outside world, they were the hard-working couple done wrong by an ungrateful daughter who sold the family home and ran. There was a part of me that still worried about being judged, especially by women their age. The ones I had always imagined were my mother's peers. But then I thought of the comments Leah read under some of her videos. Women who had given everything to children, siblings, spouses, only to be treated like stepping stones. Women who had dimmed themselves for decades and were finally at 60 or 70, wondering if it was too late to choose themselves. Maybe my story was not just about revenge. Maybe it was about permission. So I agreed. We set up in Leah's spare room with a simple chair and a soft light. She hit record. I started with the water heater, with the call that was supposed to be about a warranty and turned into a discovery that my life had been itemized. I talked about the word burden, how it had lodged behind my ribs, how hearing my parents talk about me like a savings bond that had finally matured had flipped a switch I had not known existed. I talked about quiet strength, how people mistake silence for weakness, how being the one who never explodes does not mean you cannot. As I talked, I watched my own hands in my lap twisting and untwisting and realized how steady my voice sounded. I told them about Elena, about bank statements and lavender and warnings about pens and shaking hearts. I talked about the will, the inheritance, the way skipping a generation had been her last act of rebellion against a toxic family pattern she recognized. I talked about manipulation guilt, the way phrases like "after all we did for you" can become weapons, how parents can hide behind the language of sacrifice while plotting to steal from their children. I described the legal pieces in simple terms: the lawyer, the title search, the credit freeze, the storage unit, the letter on the door. Not as a how-to guide in payback, but as proof that there are practical ways to protect yourself from people who expect your loyalty while secretly planning your eviction. I did not sugarcoat the emotional cost. I am not telling you this to say that revenge is easy, I said, looking straight into the lens. It hurts. It hurts to admit the people who were supposed to protect you were prepared to betray you. It hurts to know that you will probably never get the apology you deserve. But staying and letting them keep using you also hurts. The difference is one kind of hurt eventually heals, the other just keeps going. When I finished, Leah turned off the camera. That was powerful, she said quietly. I shrugged, suddenly shy. I just told it how it happened. She posted the video a week later. I did not watch it right away. When I finally did, alone in my apartment with the lavender pot beside me, I was startled by the woman on the screen. She looked solid, not flashy, not glamorous, but present. The comments came in slowly at first, then faster. Women in their 60s and 70s saying things like, "I wish I had done what you did when I was your age." Others saying, "My son treats me like an asset now." This opened my eyes. Some cried with me in their words. Some cheered at the part where my parents found the locks changed. Some shared their own stories of wills, rewritten inheritances used as weapons, secrets unearthed. Hidden truth after hidden truth tumbled into the light. A few accused me of being heartless, of abandoning family. The difference was, now their opinion did not reach into my bones. I could read it, feel the sting, and set it down. My worth was no longer tied to how well I played the role of dutiful daughter in a drama someone else had scripted. Leah texted me one night. "People are asking for more," she wrote. "Not just your story, your thoughts, your take on these kinds of situations. Almost like they trust you now. You could do this regularly, you know, tell stories. Help other women see that revenge can mean reclaiming their life." The idea of making this my voice, my work, felt right. I had always been good at reading blueprints. Maybe this was just another kind of emotional architecture. So I made a decision. Today, when I talk into the mic on my little channel, I picture women like Mrs. Klein, like Elena, like the ones in the comments who say they listen while they cook or walk or sit in their cars gathering courage. I tell stories about revenge and family drama and betrayal. Yes, about wills and being excluded and inheritance battles that turn suburban kitchens into courtrooms. About parents and siblings and spouses who treat their loved ones like extensions of their bank balance. About secrets and confrontations and manipulation. And the moment the tables finally turn. But under all of it, I am really talking about something else. Dignity, self-respect, the quiet kind of strength that does not need to yell to be real. Sometimes I tell my own story again in pieces. How a leaky water heater led to a recording that became my shield. How a lawyer and a real estate agent and a storage unit manager all became part of my strange little army. How I chose to leave a beautiful house by the lake in Michigan so I could finally stand on my own ground. I tell them that revenge is not always a grand gesture. Sometimes it is a single word spoken calmly. No. Sometimes it is signing your name on a contract that removes the weapon from someone else's hand and places it gently into your own pocket. The lavender on my balcony is full now. In summer, the air around it buzzes with bees. I like to imagine Elena sitting in one of the cheap metal chairs nodding in approval at my pot of purple. My parents live 15 minutes away from the lake they thought would be their view for the rest of their lives. I know through cousins and the small-town rumor mill that they still tell their version of the story at gatherings, the one where I am the villain who sold their home and ran. Let them. Revenge for me is not correcting them. It is not showing up to defend myself. It is waking up in a space they have never seen making coffee in a kitchen. They have never criticized paying bills with money I earned and protected telling stories to people who understand without needing to know my last name. If you have listened this far, if you are still here with me at the end of this long confession, maybe you see a bit of yourself in the quiet girl who finally stopped paying rent in gratitude and started asking what she owed herself. Maybe you have your own version of a lake house. A situation where someone is calling your love a debt and your life an asset they are entitled to cash out. I am not going to tell you what to do. I am not a judge or a therapist or a lawyer. I am just a woman who chose freedom even when it looked a lot like betrayal from the outside. But if you took anything from my story, let it be this. You are not a burden for wanting to be safe. You are not a traitor for refusing to sign away your future just to keep the peace. You are allowed to protect what is yours, even if the person you are protecting it from shares your last name. If you ever want to hear more stories like this, if it helps you to know you are not the only one who has walked away from a toxic family script, you can stick around. Listen, share your own, subscribe, whatever feels right. I will be here telling the truth in my quiet voice with my lavender plant and my new life rising up around me. Because this right here is the sweetest revenge I know, living on my own terms.